Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men Prime, cover dated July 1995. The cover is by Brian Hitch, inked by Paul Neary. It is one of these gimmick covers from the era, but a pretty cool one. It is a foil acetate cover and it is wraparound. The issue itself is a one-shot. It's more than double-sized, and it basically catches readers up on what will be the new status quo going forward for the various X titles after the end of Age of Apocalypse and X-Men Omega in particular. So it's a little bit difficult to show the wraparound here because of this acetate cover. I'll just play around with that a little bit for you to see the way the foil kind of shows in the light there. And if I open it up like that, or flip it over like that rather, and try and press down there, you see it's just difficult to get it spread open entirely for you to get the full sweep of the wraparound image by Brian Hitch there. Get my hand out of the way. So the better way to look at it is just to flip it over here to the back cover. So we've got the various X-Men there, heavily focused on the X-Men. We've got Angel back in one of his earlier costumes, and pretty decent. Of course, this is Brian Hitch, 1995. Very much his style is imitative of Alan Davis, and famously or infamously, Alan Davis didn't like that. So there you go. And if I just open that open this up here, the way the acetate works is you've got a underlay of the background here, like that. Okay, so this is going to be a longish video because of the length of the story inside. There's only 2 ads in this comic. The first one is for X-Man. So X-Man carries over from Age of Apocalypse and has his own series set in the Prime reality. And then there's one additional ad at the end of the issue, and I'll comment on that when we get to it. So the story opens 2 weeks ago. The narration opens in relation to 2 weeks ago, and that was the end of all reality. So it's 2 weeks after the resetting of the Prime reality, and here we've got Jean Grey out on a dark and stormy night. So the story takes place in the course of one night, the whole story, and this is Brian Hitch, obviously, his art here on this splash page, but there's little details that are really cool. So Jean, of course, has telekinetic powers, and I love the way that she's keeping the rain off herself there. So you can see the water just hitting this barrier before it hits her coat or hair. And also she's using her telekinesis to lift herself from the ground, but also swing around these 3 different flashlights as well. So that's pretty cool. Nice little thoughtful detail there. So she's out in the woods and she's looking for someone, obviously. And who is it? Now I'm going to have to turn this one to the side like that. She's out there looking for Wolverine, who's hanging out in the woods on the grounds of the X-Mansion. So I'll just make sure that you can see the whole double page spread there. That is good work, a lot of work by Brian Hitch. So he really has mastered anatomy, all of that, even though there are some quirks to his style that I'll point out as I go along that are maybe a little bit less likable. So the title of the story is Racing the Night. As I said, the story takes place over the course of one night, and there is quite the creative team involved in producing this oversized issue. So we've the credits here: Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza writers, Brian Hitch, Jeff Matsuda, Gary Frank, Mike McKone, Terry Dodson, Ben Herrera and Paul Pelletier, pencilers, and another big team of inkers as well: Al Milgrom, P. Craig Russell, Cam Smith, Mark Farmer, Mark McKenna, Tom Palmer, Tim Townsend and Hector Calazzo. So quite a large team there of pencilers and inkers. And then for the lettering, we've Richard Starkings and digital lettering by Comic Craft, and the colouring Steve Buccellati, and digital colouring by Electric Crayon. So there you go. And just maybe there is some kind of digital lettering error here, because look at the size of the speech balloon coming from Logan there. You'd almost miss it if you didn't pay great attention to the page, because the double spread image takes up so much attention that you, as I said, you'd nearly miss this. And again, you've got that continuing detail of Jean's telekinesis there, but maybe a little break in her concentration, as it seems like that splash of rainwater is coming off her chin there, maybe because of the surprise of our Wolverine surprising her from atop this tree branch here. So he says, thought I was pretty clear after what went down the other day. I need to be left alone. So this is the aftermath of Wolverine number 90, when he found Sabretooth in the X-Mansion and they fought, and Wolverine popped his claw into Sabretooth's brain just as the reality changed because of the crystal wave from the McKone crystal, and things switched to the Age of Apocalypse. So now in this issue, as I said at the beginning, we are catching up with or getting really maybe an overview of what is now the status quo post the change back to the prime reality. So Sabretooth's not dead, and Wolverine's determined that he's going to stay out in the woods so long as you keep that psycho killer alive and in the house. And Jean protests, Logan, it's not that simple. You were gone for a long time. Sabretooth was slowly making progress, but Wolverine isn't having it. He says, I told Chuck and your husband both. If you need me, I'm here. Otherwise. And it looks like there's a lightning strike on a tree branch, which catches Jean's attention. And then she looks back and Logan is gone. Gone like a whisper, as if he was never truly there at all. So this is Wolverine becoming more feral post Age of Apocalypse because of losing control in relation to Sabretooth. And that's going to be a story point going forward in the Wolverine solo series. And then our attention switches to the interior of the X-Mansion. Professor X is looking out into the woods, and he's having a little conference with Bishop there by the fireside. A lot of detail in the backgrounds from Brian Hitch in this issue. He's really putting a lot of work into this. He knows that his work here is on display, that this is a big issue, this is going to be a big seller, and he's putting everything into this. But here's one of these, a couple of the quirky aspects of his style from this period. Look at the way that Bishop's fingers are rendered here as he puts them towards the fire to warm them, even though his gloves are supposed to be insulating. But however, let's let that point go. And they're kind of like these weird, the shapes there are strange, like, how would I put it? They're like sausages going forward, like flattened sausages. And Professor X himself has quite a squat looking head. We'll see a little bit more of that towards the end of the issue too. And he's got this kind of long, flat nose as well. So little quirks of Hitch's style around this time that maybe don't work as well visually as they might otherwise. Some of the characters he does really well with, like Feral Wolverine. He does a great job on him, for example. But Professor X's head here looks a bit off, a little bit squat, as I said, and those fingers look a bit weird too. So what's happening on this page is that Bishop is having dreams, and those dreams are the Age of Apocalypse reality. And he says here, it's as if someone tried to cram years of vague recollections into my head. I remember wandering, growing older, seeing humans die, killed in horrible, horrible ways. I found people, X-Men, who weren't X-Men. They sacrificed everything on my word, but I may have lied to them. I promised them a better world. Tell me, sir, am I crazy? And that's a key point in the main story of this issue. Is the world a better world with Professor X alive and his dream does it offer real hope and a real prospect of a better world for mutants and a peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants? So Professor X says, you were already a chronal anomaly, temporarily displaced before you went into the past to save my life. That's the Legion Quest storyline. Admittedly, your side patterns have been difficult to read since your return. My greatest fear is that these visions which haunt you are neither dreams nor memories as you surmise, rather they are warnings of things to come. So there is an ominous note to the Professor's interpretation of what's going on with Bishop and his haphazard memories / dreams of the alternate reality. Now we have our first change up in the artwork for the issue. This here is Mike McKone, and he's handling this subplot concerning this particular mutant, who is Dennis Hogan is his name. Here we get his name here. And he's been traveling for 2 days, trying to make his way to upstate New York to the X Mansion, because he's a mutant and he's hoping to get some help from Professor X. Countless clues and hundreds of hushed whispers have led him to Westchester County in search of a legend. But first of all, he goes for something to eat, and that will prove to be a bad decision. So then the scene switches to Manhattan. Here we have Brian Hitch back on the art again. And this is Trish Tilby. We haven't seen her in quite some time. And of course, she's formerly the Beast's girlfriend, but it seems that they're no longer an item. And she's about to break a major story. And she thinks here to herself, don't think of it as betraying a friend. Think of it as protecting the planet. That ought to ease my conscience. Yeah, right. So a colleague of hers arrives here, Clay, and he says, I take it you found someone to confirm the rumors? And she replies, a reliable source, Clay. Someone connected with the world's greatest genetic mutation research complex, no less a place than Mur Island. And he asks her, Trish, you do realize that once this news is released, the fear and hatred of mutants will only grow worse? Are you prepared for innocent blood on your hands, Trish? Will you be willing to live with yourself after that? And the story she's about to break is about the legacy virus. So she doesn't give her response there. And it's an interesting kind of moral/ethical question that continues to this day in terms of whether news outlets, news media, whether they should intervene in censoring stories or squashing stories if it might lead to unrest in the populace, or should they just give the story, let it out there, let the information out, and let people make up their own minds instead of nannying them. So interesting that that's getting explored here back in 1995, something that's very relevant in 2024, yes. So then the scene switches to the Belle Fourche River Dam, 30 miles northwest of Reno Junction, Wyoming. And this is X Factor. So we've got Forge here, and he's dismantling a series of bombs that have been set on the dam, which the bombs have been set by Mystique, because her plan is to flood a Sentinel processing plant. So that's the setup here. Mystique herself is running away from X Factor. She says here, X Factor is actually getting better. They almost nailed me. But she runs into this shadowy figure who says, it begins, in a very interesting speech balloon style there. And also the rendering on the hand here, some kind of blade or claws at the end of the hand. And the thinking is by many readers subsequently that this is the first appearance of Onslaught, or some character that Onslaught is controlling, one and or the other. Let me know what you think about it in the comments to the video below this. So Raven is too proud to scream. She's knocked out. Val Cooper finds her unconscious, alerts the rest of X Factor to that, and Forge continues with his determination to dismantle the bombs. But he thinks to himself, what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into this time, Raven? More importantly, why am I even thinking about putting myself out for you again? And this goes back to a prophecy of Destinies all the way back in Uncanny X-Men 255, that there would be a future between Forge and Mystique. And so it's coming to pass many years later in terms of publishing time at least. So then we switch back to the Xavier Institute. So this is the portion, let's call this the frame narrative, or the frame narrative of this particular oversized issue, which is Brian Hitch focusing on the X-Men there in the mansion, and Beast there is getting ready for is getting dinner ready for everybody. He's doing a little salad bowl there, and yeah, that's pretty funny. Again, lots of detail here. The kitchen, fixtures and fittings, and also little details like the loaf of bread there as well in its packaging. You know, Brian Hitch really not scrimping on the details here. So Cyclops and Beast emerge from the kitchen with dinner for other members of the X-Men, and who's waiting for them out in the corridor except for Bishop. He's got this very determined, grim look on his face, and then he attacks them both. You filthy butchers, he calls them. And of course, this is because in the Age of Apocalypse reality, Beast and Cyclops worked for Apocalypse. They were on side with Apocalypse, and Beast in particular was Dark Beast. So what I find really funny about this is that Cyclops drops the platter of sandwiches, but Beast never drops the salad bowl. It's pretty cool. It's pretty funny. And got to give credit to Hitch to Brian Hitch for that. If it wasn't in the script, you know. So Cyclops, of course, uses his powers there to blast Bishop's guns. And Bishop says, I don't need your lies, Summers. I witnessed your atrocities with my own eyes. So, of course, they don't know what he's talking about. But Bishop is clearly suffering from what we would call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from the time he spent in the Age of Apocalypse reality. So, ultimately, Cyclops puts an end to the fight, and Bishop comes to. And there, see what I said? Beast still has the salad bowl intact. He never lets it go, never falls from his grip. That's brilliant. I just love that detail. And Cyclops says to Bishop, you on the other hand, you were trying to kill us. Bishop has come to himself again. He says, Scott, Hank, what is happening to me? So he's in trouble. Like, he is traumatized from the time he spent, the 2 decades that he spent in the Age of Apocalypse reality. And it makes sense. And so it's a good character point. Then we're back to Mike McKone in Yonkers, upstate New York. And this is that mutant again, Dennis Hogan. So he's in the diner and he's trying to keep people from seeing his mutated hand here. I can feel it again. My entire arm is morphing. Have to calm down, he thinks to himself. Can't afford to lose it with so many people around. Please, X-Men, please be there. So, and the news report is coming out, or is about to come out. We've got the TV established in the diner as well. That'll be important points coming up later. And then we switch to a long-dried drainage pipe in the shadow of the George Washington Bridge. And we've got this homeless man with a drug addiction, Jim Davis. He's been living homeless for 10 years, and this is the night that he's going to die. So he is killed here. What is it that goes through his body? Well, it turns out this leg in the foreground turns out to be marrow. So this is her first appearance as an adult, but her very first appearance is X-Force number 15 as a child, where she was sent off to a different dimension at the end of that issue by Cable, but she's back in our dimension as an adult, and she's here preparing a ritual in order to call forth the first Morlock. So we will see later in this comic as to who that first Morlock might be. Then we're back at the X-Mansion. A lot of detail on this page. You know, a little criticism I would have is I don't like these panel borders where there's no gutter here. So it makes it a little bit, the art is too busy on the page. Also having Storm's head break the panel border there. It's just all a little bit too busy. There's that salad bowl again from Beast. He delivers it intact. Good man, Beast. That's good work there. Now, something interesting here is we get a follow-up from the very end of X-Men 41, where in the Israeli desert, Rogue and Gambit kissed. So they did kiss, and now with reality back to normal, quote-unquote normal, Gambit is out. He's in a coma state, and Storm is there caring for him. And why not Rogue? Well, she has left. She's gone on a road trip with Iceman over here. They're in Key Largo, Florida, and whatever she discovered in Gambit's memories sent her running from what Storm is wondering. Tell me, Remy, says Storm here, what secret did she unlock that would frighten her enough to leave? Or is it something darker than even you are aware? And it will take a couple of years for us to discover as readers what exactly Rogue saw in Gambit's memories. And it has something to do with the Morlocks. Let's leave it at that. So then we've got Rogue here in a discotheque in Key Largo, Florida. This is Iceman with her. These couple of pages are by Ben Herrera. And Rogue here is dancing up a storm on the floor. Iceman butts in to keep her from being touched by this big hulking guy here. So he slips on the ice puddle on the floor. And then they overhear Trish Tilby's news report, her big scoop that this deadly new plague has been verified by the Center for Disease Control. It has been called the legacy virus, and was unleashed into our atmosphere months ago by the mutant terrorist known as Strife. Thought to be infectious only to mutants at first, and here comes the twist. We now have confirmation that this virus, which is transmitted through the air and has a death rate of 100%, has now begun to spread to the human population. So here we have various characters. In the subsequent pages, we get to see them watching the news report. It's Generation X here watching the news report in Massachusetts. And Jubilee calls out for frostbite. Sean, you guys better come in here and scope this out. So calling on the White Queen and Banshee to take a look at the news, because this is going to be trouble for mutants everywhere. Washington, D.C., the offices of Senator Robert Kelly. Because Trish is continuing with her news report, classified documents revealed that Jamie Madrox, a member of X Factor, the government's elite mutant task force, has recently succumbed to the virus. All attempts to contact X Factor representatives have gone unanswered. So Kelly's on the phone immediately looking for Dr. Cooper, and he's angry. Get me them now. He wants X Factor. He wants Forge and Valerie Cooper on the phone now. Funny that there's no exclamation mark there. That's weird. That's a weird disjunction between the image. He's clearly shouting on the phone, but no exclamation point. And then the scene switches here to the Mutant Research Center at Mur Island. We've got Moira McTaggart. And why are we seeing her? Because Trish Tilby isn't finished yet. A confirmed source has provided CBN with the identity of the first known human to be infected with the legacy of virus. She is, ironically enough, one of the foremost scientific minds on genetic mutations, Dr. Moira McTaggart. So Moira is infected with the legacy virus too. What do we do now? Moira asks Rory. She wishes she knew, but she has no answers. So then we're back with Dennis Hogan. He's leaving the diner, paying for his food, and they've heard the news report there, and the various patrons of the diner are talking about mutants. And this guy here is saying, this is just great. Not only can mutants kill us in our sleep, now they can kill us just by breathing germs on us. And this guy says, it's like my dad says, Manny, we should round them up on one island and burn every last one of them. So the news report, just like Trish's colleague in the newsroom worried, has in fact stoked up fear and prejudice and hatred against mutants. The storm is raging outside, there's a crash of lightning, and the door of the diner is open, and the patrons notice that Dennis has left. And then they start putting it together. You think maybe somebody didn't like the conversation? This guy's a little bit more pacific. He says, come on guys, let it go. Whoever he wasn't hurting anyone. But this firebrand here says, you heard the news report, Chevy. What if he is a mutant? Worse, what if he's an infected one? So we're going to have a panic here from these characters. Trish is finishing off her report, and there's going to be an extended version of the story at 11, and there's the Beast watching it. He's nonplussed. Remember, it's his ex-girlfriend. Psylocke asks him, is he okay? He says, no, Betsy, my girlfriend, quote unquote, just sold us out on national television. I'm decidedly not all right. So he storms off, and of course Beast has been working hard, spending so much time in the lab trying to figure out a cure for the legacy virus. So it's a double whammy for him. He's had no success on the cure for the virus, and now his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever their relation status is, has, as he feels it, sold mutants out on national television. Professor X is decisive here. He asks Scott to contact Cable immediately because there was seeded in issues before Age of Apocalypse the idea that maybe the secret to the cure for the legacy virus might be found in, I guess, Cable's DNA or his immune system or something like that. So now this is an interesting moment in the story as well, where Professor X gets a psionic, not attack as he explains, but flash, and it hits Psylocke too, and they figure it must have hit Jean as well. The professor is positive that Jean would have felt it too. It was a psionic presence, so not an attack, for lack of a better word, falling to Earth, entering our atmosphere, unequivocally more powerful than any I've ever felt before. So who could this be? Well, it turns out to be X-Man. And he falls to Earth somewhere in Switzerland. And we have the introduction of this new character, Blacksmith, who's tracked where he's fallen. And obviously he's going to get in touch with him as well. And Blacksmith says here, we've got another temporal rift. So there's a number of arrivals from the Age of Apocalypse reality. And if what's landed is anything like the last one, this whole world is in trouble. So there you go. And then we switch. By the way, I should note that the art here on this page is by Jeff Matsuda. And here now we get 2 pages by Terry Dodson. And this is a little scene set somewhere in England. So we have knocking on the door, opened by the butler here, M-Plate, from the pages of Generation X. X rather. And the butler invites him in after M-Plate threatens him. And then we get the first appearance of this character, which is Gail Edgerton. And she's there in a wheelchair note, and she's stoking the fire here. And M-Plate says, "Aren't you the cool one? You don't look at all surprised to see me." And she responds, "After everything that's happened to me in the past few months, I feel I'm prepared for anything." And she lashes out at him with the coulter reddened in the fire. And it's stuck right in his chest, but it doesn't do him any harm. He says it tickles. Now, if you've dispensed with the melodrama, he says, "Perhaps we can discuss what it is I came here to talk about." And what will it be? It seems you and I have a mutual friend, Jonathan Starsmore from Generation X, currently known in the States as a young mutant named Chamber. So this is Lobdell setting up a future storyline in Generation X. Then we're back with Dennis here. He's fleeing the crowd from the diner, and he is in despair. "I'm not going to lay down and die. I deserve a chance to live my life, and I'm not going to give it up for anyone. Why can't I just be left alone?" But there they are. They've chased him down. They've found him. They're tooled up to give him a beating. And this one, the firebrand, she's the one who's stoking everything, says, "I'm curious. I mean, mutants are supposed to be real powerful, right? So tell me, how powerful do you feel right now?" As he's staring at that, baseball bat or lead piping or whatever it might be. And so then he transforms. He loses control of his power, and he transforms into this kind of reptilian-looking creature. It's by being calm that he's able to control the transformation. So then he's whacked in the back of the head by a baseball bat, by the guy who was saying maybe leave him alone. "Sorry, pal." And then they just start beating on him. And the narrative caption says, "All that matters is that 5 youths have encountered something different from themselves. They must destroy it, even if that it is another living human being." So fear and hatred of the other, back big as a theme of the X-Men books after Age of Apocalypse. Then we're back at the X-Mansion. Getting a lot of detail on these pages from Brian Hitch. And the professor gets a flash of Dennis fleeing from his life in the woods. He's running towards the X-Mansion, which was his ultimate destination. So the professor says to Storm, "Quickly, Storm, we're needed several miles due north of here now. Despite the psionic interference, I'm sensing a young mutant in distress. Not far from here, can't pinpoint his location." So I guess this is an explanation why they don't pile into the Blackbird and go immediately. So Storm says, "Perhaps you should stay here, coordinate from," but he says, "There's no time. I'll try to psionically contact the rest of the X-Men." So he contacts Logan in the woods, gets him moving, and then we switch scenes to X-Force, who are currently headquartered in Murder World. But suddenly Arcade makes an appearance. They're training there. So we get little introductions to all the characters. This couple of pages is by Gary Frank and Cam Smith. So here they are. Formerly they were working on Incredible Hulk, and now they are here doing a couple of pages on this. So Arcade appears and he says, "Good golly gosh, I turned my back for 5 minutes and my home is infected with a plague of mutants." So he says to Domino, "You've got 60 seconds to vacate my former facility." And so he does a countdown. So they run, and this is funny here from Cannonball says, "The little weasel cheated us out of 10 seconds, but they all make it out alive." Warpath went back for Sunspot. And then who do they meet outside the ruins of Murder World? Except for Cyclops. And he says, when Cable asks him, are you here? He says, you're a long way from Westchester, Mr. Summers. Is this a business call or pleasure? Maybe a little of both, Mr. Summers. So father and son talking here. I like that little kind of character detail. My guess is that this page is dialogued by Fabian Nicieza. Because of course he's the writer on the adjectiveless X-Men, so he's primarily writing Cyclops, and also on X-Force primarily writing Cable. So Cyclops explains, Professor Xavier would like a word with you and your people. Cable says, as it turns out, our evening training session has just been cancelled. You know, that's an understatement. Along with our headquarters, he says more quietly, under the circumstances we'd be happy to join you. So this is setting up X-Force now. Their base of operations will be the X-Mansion. They're moving into the X-Mansion. Then we're back in Wyoming, Chef Matsuda again. So something interesting is happening here. Havoc is losing, is kind of like, he's in trouble here. And the question is, what's up with him? Then there's a little fake out here where Val Cooper isn't Val Cooper. It turns out to be Mystique. So Forge twigs to it, kicks her in the head, knocks her out. That's Forge really taking care of Mystique, eh? And then Val emerges from the cave here, and she says she might have wished she'd stayed on the floor of that cavern. Are you all right? Forge asks her, and Val says her shape-shifting powers are already closing her wounds. You think someone who was smart enough to track her would have known that wouldn't be enough to kill her. So that's Forge talking there, and Val says, you think maybe someone was just out to make a statement? So this is all in relation to that either Onslaught in the cave or some character that Onslaught was controlling in the cave. And then Forge twigs that something's up with Polaris. He contacts her rather on the mic, and he says, are we ready to go? And Polaris says, everyone's clear, Forge. I guess we can put this down in the win column. But Havoc says here, maybe not just yet, and he's losing control of his power, and then the dam, he blows up the dam, and also some secondary explosives went off, ones that Forge didn't find. So what happened here? Val is asking, and Forge says that Mystique must have planted more than one set of explosives. Fortunately, there was nobody down below. But what happened to Havoc and Polaris? They're okay. Polaris pulled Havoc out of the onrush of water, but she explains, it wasn't a bomb that went off initially, it was Alex. So this is setting up a storyline in X Factor where Havoc is losing control of his powers. Then we switch to Hammer Bay and we catch up with Excalibur. And their craft was plunging towards Genosha just before the McKone crystal wave hit. So here they are, 2 weeks later, they're alive and well. And they are going through the files of Philip Moreau, the chief engineer. And they have found this particular mutant who is mutate rather. He is the prime mutate or original mutate. So he's got the number 101 tattooed on his forehead. Also, his name is Mr. Edgerton. So is he connected? Is he grandfather to Gail Edgerton from earlier? Little mystery there. The art on this page and the next couple of pages is by Paul Pelletier. Okay, just make that note too. So Edgerton says here, going through the files of Philip Moreau, the engineer, by the Helix, I can't believe what I'm reading. As if I'm staring into the end of the world. So Pete Wisdom here says, now that we're all frightened out of our respective jammies, let's move on to our rendezvous with Braddock and Wagner. So that's Captain Britain and Nightcrawler. The last thing we need is to traipse about Genosha at night and get caught. Turn the page. Who here on this page has made it from the Age of Apocalypse to the Prime Reality except for Sugarman from the pages of Generation Next? Here he is. And it turns out that he has been in Genosha for 20 years. So he arrived in the Prime Reality 20 years earlier. And he's the reason for the technology that the Engineer had in Genosha. He provided that to Moreau. So he says here in his soliloquy, how many variations of X people are going to hop about Genosha before they realize they shouldn't muck in affairs of the state, siding with Signing up Oldie, though, give him credit. Closest they've come to finding the power behind the throne. Too close. Say goodnight, Oldie. So he flips some kind of switch, and basically the Prime mutate is blown up. And Shadowcat says the poor man was obviously killed to Douglock, and he took Moreau's notes with him. So Sugarman taking steps there to cover up his presence in Genosha. And then we have, this is an interesting little sequence. Airlock processing engaged, atmospheric conditioning nominal. Reminds me a little bit of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then out of the hatch, there emerges Peter Rasputin, Colossus, and some of the acolytes. So they're going out to investigate an anomaly that is orbiting Avalon. The artwork on, if I had to guess, this is still Paul Pelletier. This too. And what's happening here is we get, we have Exodus here, who has sent them out in order to investigate the object and bring it to him. He orders Colossus. So then we get a little conversation between Exodus and Vought here. So he's watching Colossus on screen going towards the object. This page is by Gary Frank, inked by Cam Smith. So Exodus here says that this object is proof that great times are at hand. Prepare yourselves to the acolytes. They're religious nuts. And Voight thinks to herself, Rasputin is right. We don't know what this object is. And Exodus, with his talk of signs and portents, may be leading us to our ruin. On the screen, what's happening out there. So Colossus says it's blinding, a reflective surface of some kind. Let's turn the page. We're still with Gary Frank on art for these two pages. It appears to be a chunk of ice. So Colossus orders one of the acolytes who's Rusty. We need a former Hellion. We need to melt this asteroid down. So he uses his power to melt some of the ice. And then inside, there is some sort of heat flare coming from within the ice too. So Colossus, who's changed into his metallic form in his spacesuit, says, Rusty, everyone get a safe distance away from it. And here we go. Who is inside the chunk of ice? And it looks like whoever it is alive. So this will turn out to be Holocaust. And then we're back to the tunnels under Manhattan. And this is Marrow here. And she's wondering whether a ritual is going to work in terms of calling forth the first Morlock. The art here is by Jeff Matsuda on this page and this page. And who does it turn out to be except for Dark Beast? And Dark Beast reveals in his monologue here that he's responsible for the creation of the Morlocks. So he says here, at a glance, I can tell you're a lovely piece of work. Specifically, you're my work. 1 or 2 generation removed, true, but my work nonetheless. To be honest, your ancestors, the Morlocks, proved to be somewhat of a disappointment, with the exception of Callisto, of course. But I trust you and your friends have so much more to offer your creator. And she says 12 of us, so 6, waiting to ignite the world above, fry out the humans, just waiting for the first one's words. So this is setting up a storyline that will get covered in upcoming issues of Uncanny X-Men, if I recall. Yes. And then we're back to Brian Hitch for the rest of the issue, closing out the one-shot. So Professor X is in psionic contact with Dennis as he's being beaten on the ground. And it's interesting here how the body language of Dennis is mirrored there by Professor X. So Storm is worried about him, and then his mind leaves his body because he's traveling on the astral plane to Dennis and to the scene of the beating here. And he's in despair that he's too late because Dennis is unmoving on the ground. And so he kneels down in front of the body as the crowd of thugs walk away. Their work is done. The baseball bat is dropped, and away they drive. One of them asks, "You think we'll get into trouble for this? Trouble for killing a mutant? We'll probably get a medal." So as I said, like, this is the return of that theme from the Claremont era, that mutants are feared and hated by the majority of people in the world. And of course, the legacy virus now is ramping up that fear and hatred. The news that Trish Tilby has released. So finally, the X-Men arrive too late, but Dennis is still alive, barely, just in time to say to Professor X, your X-Men knew I'd be safe once I found you, knew you'd help me, but then he dies. Okay? So Dennis introduced at the beginning of the issue with some hope that maybe he'd get some help from the Professor, but beaten by a mob of bigots who fear and hate him just because he is a mutant. And so the Professor is in despair. He says to Bishop, earlier you asked me if you've been dishonest in offering others the chance for a better world in the Age of Apocalypse reality. And the Professor says here, the truth of the matter, my X-Men, is that we would be insane not to fight for a better world. So we get a firm restatement of Professor X's dream. Because heaven help us, if this is our future, heaven help us all. And Wolverine says, amen to that, bub. And there you go. Welcome to Salem Center. So the X-Men standing around the body of a dead mutant. And so the Professor sees it as an opportunity to restate the importance of his dream. Flash of lightning there in the background. But again, we get to see those kind of squat heads that Brian Hitch is doing on the characters. You see it there, especially with Bishop. So a little stylistic tick from this era that he gets rid of later on. And then here's the other ad I talked about earlier in the video. So we've only got 2 ads in the issue, and it's kind of strange that the final ad here is for a Spider-Man miniseries, The Lost Years, a 3-issue limited series in Marvel select format covering a major turning point in the life of Ben Reilly, because this was the era of the clone saga and all of that controversy, by J.M. DeMatteis, John Romita Jr. and Klaus Janson. So Romita Jr., after he was unceremoniously dropped from Uncanny X-Men to be replaced by Joe Madureira, well, he was at a loose end, and this is his major project that he did after getting done penciling the Batman Punisher crossover special between Marvel and DC. So I wonder, did Bob Harris feel guilty and insist on including this ad in the issue in order to give a little promotion to Romita Jr.'s next project? Was it that, or was it Marvel marketing that asked to include this? But the one thing I think they should have included is a checklist of all the X titles for July, because we've just had the beginning of the storylines in this one-shot that they will be covering in their subsequent issues going forward, including, X Factor, Excalibur, the Wolverine solo series, etc., etc. Why not include a page covering all of that? But anyway, that's just what I think. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on X-Men Prime. It is an issue, a one-shot, that sets up the status quo post Age of Apocalypse back in the Prime reality, and I think it does a good job, more or less. 1 or 2 questionable decisions, maybe having Sugarman be behind Genosha. I don't know if that's such a good idea in terms of a retcon. And also Dark Beast as the originator of the Morlocks. Again, I don't know about the wisdom of that as a retcon, whether it's needed or not. But I guess they had to do something with the characters in order to weave them in to the 20 years they'd spent in the Prime reality. What would they have been up to? So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on X-Men Prime. If you did, please like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.